Welcome to Hushtarot1111. I am Hush, here to bring you a new series for the month of February. As we all know, I've been highly inspired by the book Pussy Prayers, which is a book designed for Black women to rekindle our connections to our pleasure centers and heal from our traumas, reclaim what was lost to us, and that is our sacred sexuality. And in part of this reclamation, I'm bringing these series to pay homage to our Black women who did not have that opportunity. Today, we honor the mothers of modern gynecology, and they are Anarcha Scott, Betsy, Lucy, and at least 7 other enslaved women who were forced to undergo experimental surgeries by the Dr. J. Marion Sims in Montgomery, Alabama. Before we get into the traumas that these women endured under the care of Dr. Sims, I also want us to address the physical trauma that they were already enduring outside of the institution of slavery. We're going to keep this relegated to their womb. During the 19th century, there was a common childbirth defect known as a vesicovaginal fistula, and this is a tear between the uterus and the bladder during childbirth. This caused constant pain. Other symptoms included bladder leakage, also uncontrollable bowel movements, and most of these women during this time were usually quarantined off from other people. Of course, other symptoms included massive depression, and women were known to commit suicide due to the constant pain. It is also very important to note there was no cure for this condition. What makes that even more heartbreaking is that as women in servitude, Anarcha, Betsy, Lucy, all of these women were told they were just going to have to live with the pain and those scars and the shame of those injuries for the rest of their lives. So what happens next? It does not get any easier. Enter J. Marion Sims, a Southern-born slaveholder who, like most doctors at that time, experimented in several different genres of medicine, including dentistry, general surgery, you name it, he did it. He, like most doctors, did not really have an interest in treating women. In fact, the treatment of women was seen as something goofy. It was taboo. It was laughed at in his profession. So it does go without saying that Sims had no specific gynecological training. Due to conflicting text, I am unsure whether it was 17-year-old Anarcha or if it was Lucy that was first to be presented to the doctor. But what I do know is that their masters had become frustrated with their conditions, not because they actually cared about them, but because these young women could no longer do the hard labor that would earn that extra money. So they were taken to Dr. Sims. Dr. Sims, of course, we know, did not really have an interest in treating these young women. However, he was obsessed with putting his name in the history books. He was a glory whore, like a lot of doctors during this time. Following Lucy and Anarcha was Betsy. Prior to the start of these experimental operations, these women were led into rooms packed with white men who were all doctors wanting to watch the procedure. They were not asked whether or not they were comfortable with men watching them while they were naked, sprawled out on a table and strapped down to keep them from moving around during the surgeries. And why? Because Sims did not use anesthesia, which was available at this time to numb their pain. And it was partly because doctors feared that patients could die from anesthesia, but as it pertained to Black women, it was because of the belief that Black women did not experience pain the same way that white women did, which is really code for I am not wasting perfectly good anesthesia on a piece of property, because these women were still seen as property. According to Sims' own writings, Lucy, Betsy, Anarcha, and other enslaved women who were also presented to him underwent multiple experimental surgeries over the course of a 5-year period. Anarcha herself is recorded to have over 30 experimental operations on her body, which totaled, I believe, 4 years of that 5-year period. Now, Sims never really recorded his failures. However, In Lucy's experimentation, there was a documented moment in which he implanted a sponge in her body, and I believe it was for her bladder, but she experienced a massive infection and suffered for days. Okay, that was considered a major failure and the only recorded one that he admitted to. I will also say that during this time, he also brought one patient in that had a very unique case, but her master wasn't willing to risk his investment on the experimental surgery because, again, these women were not considered as human beings, but they were property, by which means they were just used to garner more income. Throughout the research that I have found, it's also said that Lucy also endured nearly 40 surgeries, if not more than 40. But it is Anarcha who is the only one that is documented as finally healing and making a full recovery after her 30th surgery. Now, it is also important to note that we do not know these women's dates of deaths or what their life expectancy was after these procedures. However, in 1852, Sims published an article that outlined this new procedure, but he did not mention that he operated on enslaved women, nor did he mention that he had complete control over their bodies or that he did not provide the proper treatment to prevent any pain during these operations. It is also very important to note that the idea that Black women do not endure or feel the same pain as our white counterparts is still prevalent in the medical community today. As a result of this idea, Black women still endure racial bias when seeking treatment. As it pertains to the womb, Black women have the highest mortality rate in America, and yet it is through the exploitation of enslaved women's bodies that these surgical advancements even came to be. So while Sims is coined the father of modern gynecology, let us stop to honor the women who endured these surgeries, given no anesthetic. Our mothers, Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, and all of the other unnamed women under the quote-unquote care of Dr. Sims, let us all stop to remember them because they are our mothers.